Today I want to talk to you about how to create a thesis statement. My focus will be for the English 101 class, but this will apply to any information-oriented type of essays. It's going to be different for a literature paper, and I'll have a separate integrity class for thesis statements for literature classes, literature-based classes like 251 and 102. But some of these will still apply. First of all, a thesis is very important in a college paper. Your readers, including your instructor and primarily your instructor, will expect to see what we call a explicitly stated thesis. That means we don't have to guess, we don't have to come up with it. It's stated clearly in your paper. And where this one's, the book says, and by the way, I'm in our little brown handbook on page 14 if you want to follow along there. I have it pulled up from my comp lab where it can be viewed online. It says often at the end of your introduction, and for my class that needs to be always the last sentence of your introduction, and that's very, very important. That's where I'm going to look for it, and your grade will be affected if I cannot find your thesis statement at the end of your introduction. So what does a thesis do? This has the positive, this is what it does. I would point out that your patterns textbook on page 32 and 33, which I'll refer to, but I can't put up here on the screen, has also some negatives of what a thesis statement does not do at this level. So I'm going to refer to that in a second. But first of all, what does a thesis statement do? What is its job? And it says it has three crucial functions. So the first three are mandatory, and I like to see the fourth one as well, and that's what we're going to be practicing, is previewing the arrangement of ideas. So we're going to put into practice all four. First of all, it narrows your subject to a single central idea. Often in my class you will have a set of topics to choose from, and within that topic, it's very broad. There are different approaches. Now, the type of essay that you're assigned, whether it be exemplification or cause-effect or definition or comparison-contrast or argument, will really help determine the next level of narrowing it down. But what you have to say, whether you argue a particular viewpoint, that narrows it down. In your thesis it should be stated which cause and which effect that your paper is going to be focused on. What points of comparison and contrast or both are you going to be writing about? And that is where I say the thesis statement is like a mini one-sentence version of your paper right off the top. And that's something that's different about college papers than other papers. They're not stories. They're not supposed to be all that creative. They're supposed to be straight to the point, up front, right at the beginning of the paper. At the end of the introduction, you're telling the reader what this paper is going to be about, what it's going to address. No mystery. And it's very rare that we would ever intentionally delay a thesis to the end, and that's within a very small framework, usually dealing with a hostile audience when you're dealing with a controversial subject. We're going to stay away from that and just get the first basic job down, because clarity is our number one goal. When we're writing at this level, your grade is dependent upon it. You want to be clear. Also, that translates into your job. Your boss does not want to be mystified, by what you are writing to them. If you're writing a report, the person reading the report needs the report to be clear. So our goal is going to be functional clarity. In this type of paper, it starts with a very clear thesis statement. The second function is it claims something specific and significant about your subject, something that you will have to provide some support. Your paper itself will explain this and give examples and provide reasons for this one thesis statement. It's usually a little risky too. By that it means it's not generic, not already known. It's going to be insightful. It's going to be focused. It's going to be specific to you. Now, the thesis statement, should not use the wording "my purpose is," okay, and they talk about that in your patterns book on page 32. But if it's worded properly, it should be obvious that your purpose is either explanatory or argumentative. That should, if it's worded correctly, you shouldn't have to have the little labels, the purpose of my essay is. It's just not necessary. The last one, and this is something we're going to practice doing, is previewing the arrangement of ideas. Like if we have a statement of, this is the most important, priority in my life, whatever that this is will be unique to you, and we know that you're focusing on importance, that you would say because, and kind of preview the reasons that you're going to give in your paper. And that just does so many things. It keeps that clarity in the forefront. It helps you organize your essay. It's very easy to follow. It just strengthens the clarity, so we're going to practice that. All right, we'll go to the next page to look at some examples. But before we do that, I want to bump off this page for a second. Oh, it's not going to let me do that too well. All right. One thing that your thesis statement should not do, we said already, is state and use the wording, my purpose is. We also want to avoid announcement wording. This paper will discuss, this I will examine. That's announcement wording, okay? That might be fine when you're starting out trying to figure out what you're doing. It might be fine. It might have been fine in high school. But for the papers in this class and most of the classes you'll be taking in college, you should be wording it in a way, putting it in a place that we just know that's what you're doing. We try to avoid personal pronouns for one thing, and the focus is not the paper, it's the topic. It's not me, the writer, it's the issue. And so that's part of the reasoning for kind of keeping that out of there. If you have to say that, then you haven't done a good job of putting it in a strong position, which is at the end of the introduction, and you haven't done a good job of wording the thesis itself if you have to rely on wording like that. So don't use announcement wording. Do not state it as a purpose. The purpose of my paper is. All right, let's take a look at these. They are strong, examples. Okay, let's say that we've been given the topic in a history class, Abraham Lincoln's delay in emancipating the slaves. All right, that's the subject, and this one takes a cause, effect, a reason, explanation. They're going to explain why. Lincoln delayed emancipating any slaves until 1863 because his primary goal was to restore and preserve the Union with or without slavery. Okay, so that's the claim, was this would help him preserve the Union. Now, this is not a statement of fact, and that's something else that our patterns book says that a thesis statement should not be just a statement of fact. The statement of fact would be Lincoln delayed the emancipating of slaves until 1863, period. Well, of course, we all know that. There's no insight to that. There is some debate, some discussion as to why he did that. What was his purpose? If it had been maybe stated in a lot of documents, then it would become a statement of fact. He stated his purpose. But if it's only hinted at and people have to have theories about it, then this paper is going to explain why this is maybe the most plausible answer. Or maybe it's something that was not known before, and this paper is going to reveal that to the reader. So a lot of this has to do with your reader. What do they know? What do they need information about? But you can see it's focused. We know exactly what that paper is going to do. It's going to explain how Lincoln delaying the emancipation until 1863 fulfilled his goal to restore and preserve the Union. Let's take a look at the other one. Preventing juvenile crime. Juveniles can be diverted from crime by active learning programs, full-time sports, and third, intervention by mentors and role models. Now this, I just want to jump out and point out, this has a three-prong ending. Has three parts to it. It does that preview. I know, and I read that statement, and I know exactly what that paper is going to be about. And it's going to have body paragraphs. One of them, at least one, is going to be about how juveniles can be diverted from crime by active learning programs. It's going to explain what those are. It's going to explain how that helps, and it's going to give me supporting examples of actual active learning programs that have helped juveniles stay out of crime and in gangs. Same would be true. I'd expect another section on full-time sports programs with examples, and a whole set of paragraphs or section on intervention by mentors and role models with examples. That's going to lay itself out perfectly, and that is a strong thesis. Now, does everybody think that that's the only way juveniles can be diverted from crime? No. Some people have, I think it's primarily through education, or it has to do with family, or it has to do with economics. So this paper is saying these are the three that they've selected, and they're going to explain. And that's it. It's not going to get off on any side-related topics. Now, some are explanatory and some are argumentative. Now, that's two general categories. We're going to look at specific kinds of essays within that, but we will be getting to an argumentative thesis statement, and that's where it's highly controversial. That's where people take a stand, a position on a issue that is undecided, and it's not just a matter of getting more information or understanding it better, but there is division over it. Drivers' use of cell phones, probably update that to even go texting and driving, and some states have outlawed it, and some communities, the community I live in currently, just last year outlawed texting while driving. If you're caught texting while you're driving, you can be ticketed and fined. Some people don't think that's right, and other states or cities don't have that. Here's a claim: drivers' use of cell phones should be outlawed because people who talk and drive at the same time cause accidents. Well, you might go, well, some people do, but not me. There's an issue, there's a stand, and it's controversial, and you would definitely are trying to prove your point. And that's the difference. You're having to really prove a point to an audience that may not necessarily agree with you. It's not that they just need more information, although they might. But you are definitely trying to prove something. A thesis statement makes that very clear. It makes it very clear what the issue is and what the position of the writer is. We have no doubt this is not a report on the controversy. It's not a report or an explanation of how often texting while driving creates accidents. It is a definite positional claim that says it should or should not. And that's one of the words we look for, is should or should not, when we're doing argument thesis statements, which you can come back to this, when it's time to do that. But what we can see is that a thesis statement is strong, it's clear, it definitely tells the reader what the essay is going to be about. Now, how do you write one of these things? They just don't drop out of your head. You really do have to do some brainstorming. You really do have to come up with some of your own perspectives before you can state it in a thesis statement. And you usually start with what I call a preliminary thesis. It's just your basic position or your basic topic with reasons, and then as you go along, we'll be trying to develop them into a little bit more sophisticated wording. Once you've kind of drafted out your essay, then you can go back and check it against your preliminary thesis statement and see, how much they match, and you have a better understanding of what you're trying to say because you've written it, and then you can tweak it. And that's one of the things that we do in revision. Let's turn the page and take a look at a couple more examples, and then when you're checking it, the book is really good about giving you checklists, what to look for. A lot of times we don't know what to do, we don't know how to change something, and page 16 has that. You look at the subject of your statement and look at your paper. They need to match, and if your thesis statement made a claim, it does have to have some kind of significance. It needs to have some indication of that it matters. And is it too broad, or is it limited enough? You can't prove everything in one paper. You just have to choose what you're going to try to explain or prove, and then it all needs to go together. Let's take a look at what we mean by that. The first example, and if you were in class with me, I'd have you read some of this out loud, but since we have to do it this way, I'm going to read it. You read along. Okay, here's an original preliminary thesis. Start out: this new product, whatever it is, brought in over $300,000 last year. That's nice, but it's not a good thesis. It doesn't claim anything. I don't know what's going to be explained. That's just a simple statement of fact. I don't know why that's important. Okay, so, it doesn't pass the so what either. But let's look at the revision. This new product succeeded because of its one, innovative marketing campaign, or primarily you could say because of its innovative marketing campaign, including widespread press coverage, in-store entertainment, and a consumer newsletter. Now there's some significance. Now you're going to explain something to me. First of all, find out that bringing in $300,000 last year is really good because of the word succeeded. And now I know why. Because of an innovative marketing campaign. Now that's the main reason, but look how it's still given some sub-points. I know what that paper is going to do. It's going to explain the campaign in general and then in specifics. Widespread press coverage. It's going to tell me how widespread that was, how they achieved it, give me examples of how it worked, what the in-store entertainment was, how that was measured as being valuable, and tell me about the consumer newsletter. Okay, well, let's move on to a couple of the other thesis statements. People should not go on fad diets. There is a claim, but it doesn't really say why, and that's not enough. So this one that's revised says fad diets can be dangerous when they deprive the body of essential nutrients or rely excessively on potentially harmful foods. Now, a lot more specific, and you can tell that there's a big difference between what this student or person found out or thought of to begin with. They may have started out going, okay, I'm going to write a paper that's about, people shouldn't go on fad diets. I'm against that. But once they've done the work then of the research and the thought process, then you can come up with a more specific thing. And it's less about should, and it's more explaining, hey, they can be dangerous when this happens or that happens. And then you explain that and you give examples of that. And then maybe your conclusion is that, they're a bad idea. But it's not just yes, no, for, against. It's more complex than that. And that's what we're looking for in your work at the college level, is not a simplistic, basic, broad brush view of things or telling us about things that, we can Google on the internet just like you and tell us facts. Do things that explain and offer insight. I mean, when you move into your job, sometimes your work at the beginning is just to report what is, but if you want to move your way up, you're going to have to be somebody who can dig deeper and explain things and give specifics and not just vague generalities. So we're working on that skill. And even though we're going to apply it to writing, it will be useful throughout your whole life, your whole career specifically. So there's several more if you want to look at those. I want to move just to the top. Well, the bottom gives you some examples to consider, and you can see that there's some problems. There are obvious problems with some of these. The poem is about motherhood. It's just an announcement. It's not a thesis statement. Good manners make our society work. That's too vague. I mean, that's just very vague and broad. One evening of a radio talk show amply illustrates both the appeal of such shows and their silliness. It's getting better. It's still, I still don't know what it's really talking about, but I have a better idea. The region of Islam is widely misunderstood. That's confusing to me because Islam is a religion and not a region, and that's just such a broad brush. It's like fad diets can be dangerous. So give me a because. If it's the religion of Islam, it's understood in the United States because, then I have something to kind of look forward to in your paper. All right, we're going to stop there for thesis statements. There is a process that is kind of explained in your book about how you get started, how you organize, kind of how you work from some experiences into developing a thesis statement. And they have one here that they started with on a scratch kind of, I don't call it scratch outline, I call it pre-writing, but it looks pretty much the same. It's just this preliminary idea, and then you have a bullet outline. It's just little points, and then you work on developing those, and then you can get your way through. They use a tree diagram and so forth, but they didn't revise that thesis too much for the formal outline. They had a pretty good start as they went along. One more thing, look at page 34 in the patterns book. It talks about 3 characteristics that your thesis should have, and some examples there that are useful. They also apply, many of these are more specific in our patterns book to the kinds of essays we'll be writing in 101, so I highly recommend that you take a look at those couple of pages.